This PowerPoint will go over the history of fighting for equal pay, the law made to enforce equal pay for equal work, and examples of when this law was violated, and the results of the violations. There are many reasons why this law of equal pay for equal work came about. In 1869, a letter to the editor of the New York Times questioned why female government employees were not paid as much as male ones. The first bill to fight for this issue was brought up in 1870, and it passed the House of Representatives by about 100 votes, but was not particularly favored by the Senate in 1870. The first documented strike to fight for equal pay for equal work was by the Western Union Workers, which is a telegraph company. They went on strike in 1833 for equal work for equal pay. The first documented breakthrough of equal pay for equal work was in 1911 when teachers in New York were granted equal pay for equal work. And in the 20th century, women started doing jobs that men were supposed to be doing due to the war. And this caused the National War Labor Board to decide that they should be paid the same since they were doing the work that the men were normally doing. And the national legislation passed the Equal Pay Law in 1963 after it was signed by John F. Kennedy. So what exactly is this law of the Equal Pay Act of 1963? This law prohibits discrimination of wages between men and women that work in the same place doing jobs that require the same skill and effort. And another rule of this law is that no employee shall force another employee to discriminate based on gender. So if it's a middle manager or just any head of any part of the workplace, they are not allowed to discriminate as well, and nobody is allowed to intimidate them and make them discriminate in the workplace. There are many purposes of what this law is supposed to prevent, and a few things would be to avoid labor disputes that burden commerce, so to avoid arguments and disputes between men and women in management saying that one gender is making more than the other. It prevents employers from taking advantage or maximizing the labor from specific employees, such as making males do all the manual labor just because they're males. And it allows for a fair method of competition, so you're not allowed to favor one gender in the workplace, and wages and living standards for health and efficiency should not differ between males and females, which means that males should not be paid more than females or vice versa, and they shouldn't be able to have better living standards than each other. One example of a violation of the Equal Pay Act of 1963 was a woman in Florida who worked for a company named Citicorp Service Center, was promoted to manage an area of the company, and she never received a bonus or raise. She also found out that the male managers were making twice as much as she was. She was making around $78,000, and they were making around $140,000 to $150,000. She was also bypassed for a bonus or raise again in 2011 and was fired that same year without ever receiving severance pay. She decided that this was not fair, and it was because she was a female, so she took the company to court and sued them in 2012 and won that case and received a check for $340,000 in back pay, and the company was found guilty of violating the Equal Pay Act of 1963. Another example of how this law was violated was a fast food restaurant named Checkers, which is a large franchise, was sued by the EEOC for scheduling female employees for less hours than men and paying the female employees less than they paid the men. It was said that they routinely paid female shift managers less, scheduled the normal female employees less than they scheduled the men employees, and the female employees performed the same duties as their male counterparts. So the managers had the same duties as the male managers, and the female cooks and servers had the same duties as the male cooks, and they were paid less, as documented in the case. This is a perfect example of how you violate the Equal Pay Act of 1963. The Equal Pay Act of 1963 ties into ethics in many ways. It is enforcing fair ethics within the workplace. This is what the law was created to do. And ethics or governs a person's behavior in the workplace, and it makes it against the law to treat women unfairly in the workplace just because they are female. And if you are following good ethics and morals in the workplace, you should treat all genders fairly in the workplace and do not discriminate in any way just because they are a certain gender. Penalties for violating the Equal Pay Act of 1963 include back pay to employees who were discriminated against. Back pay is wages that were lost due to discrimination, such as being denied a promotion or being wrongfully terminated, which is being fired strictly based off your gender. So if you were to go to court for it and prove that you were fired due to your gender, you would get back paid from the day you were fired. Another penalty for violating the act is they pay out-of-pocket costs. So if you were terminated and had to pay your own health insurance during the time you were fighting them in court, they would be required to pay for your health insurance during that time. Another penalty is reinstatement or promotion, which is also known as injunctive relief, which is the workplace being required to hire you back due to you being wrongly terminated. And another penalty would be court costs and attorney fees, which is if you're going to sue them in court and they are found guilty, they have to pay for your court costs and attorney fees while you were fighting that case. These are the resources that I used in developing this presentation.